Hi, my name is Shannon Elizabeth, and today I'm going to show you how I turned this archway from this into this. Stick around if you want to know how.
Ooh, the finger guns. This is how I made an arch.
Here's how I made an arch. You can't be a gymnast. You want to give me a shot? Yeah. So this is actually a pretty easy DIY. It seems intimidating because it's technically changing the framing of your house, but really anyone can do it with some tools. And I think it's totally worth it. It really changes the whole vibe of the area. And this is one of the first things someone sees when they enter our house. So it really makes a huge difference. And it actually makes the house seem expensive too, instead of just an average looking house. So let's get started. This is what the doorway looked like before. So we decided to replace the whole drywall because it looked like this, and it had a giant hole in the middle of it because of the wall heater that we removed. But most likely you won't have to replace your whole wall of drywall, although you should remove your drywall if it's crumbly, which means that there was water damage at some point, if the front paper was ripped off like here, or if there's just a ton of holes that it would be easier to replace the whole thing than to patch all of the holes. So I got all of the drywall out of the way, and then I started planning my arch. I started making this cardboard cutout template, but it was really flimsy and it was annoying me. So I said, screw it, I've never made templates before, so why start now? So I just went straight to the wood. I had this 1/2-inch plywood left over from another project, so I just used this. So an easy way to make a perfect circle or an arch with stuff you have laying around the house is by using some string and a nail. So it took me a while to figure out what measurement I wanted to create, aka like how wide I wanted the arch to be, because there's a lot of different style arches, but I wanted an arch like this, and I found that to get an arch like this, it is a perfect semicircle. So the most important thing is that the dimension is half of the width of the door. So I set this piece of string to half, literally the width of the doorway. So got my measurement down and then drew this perfect circle. And then using a jigsaw, I just followed the line that I made and just go nice and slow. And if you notice you're going off the line a bit, just back up a little bit and go again. And if it's not perfect, it's okay. You'll be covering it with drywall anyways, so just do your best. So I got one piece cut out, and then I used it to trace the other piece just to make sure that it was the same size, and then cut out this other corner piece. And the reason that I did separate corner pieces like this instead of something connected like this is because I wanted to keep my archway as tall as possible and not lose any height at all. And also because this uses a lot less wood, I would have had to use this entire half of this plywood instead of just this amount of wood. So got all of those corner arches cut, and then I sanded them down a little bit just to make sure there was no rough edges. And then you can see they'll go right here in the corner, and now you can see the beginning of our arch being formed. So on this side, there's old drywall in the way. So with the utility knife, I just kept on marking over and over and kept kind of cutting through the old drywall to get it out of the way. And while doing this, right here, you can see I'm kind of giving extra space because I'm leaving space for the new drywall that's going to be on top of the arch. Here I'm making sure that it's flush with this stud, and then I'm marking a line so I know that it will be completely flush. So now I can measure that distance between each piece of plywood, and then I can cut a piece of wood that can fit that space. And then I went back outside, and with the same plywood that I used earlier, I measured that distance between each piece of plywood, and I cut plywood, and I also cut these wooden blocks to that size. And you can see here how the pieces are going to go together. So now I'm actually going to start adding it to my framing. So I first attached these little 2x4 blocks, and these I put into the framing so that I could later attach this piece of plywood to that. And I added 3 of those blocks to each side total, just to make sure that it was extra stable and the plywood would stay flush with the framing. Just make sure that it's not sticking out into the archway though. Got all those blocks installed, and now I can put the other side on. And you can see here it looks recessed, and it is because I'm leaving room for the drywall that's gonna go on top of this. And I'm adding these little pieces here so the arched drywall can attach to these little pieces here. And then did this whole thing again with the other side. Now the framing is complete for this, and we can move on to adding drywall. So adding drywall to this wall, I realized it would be easier to just put the whole sheet up and cut it from the other side. So that's exactly what I did. I got Golan to help me, and I attached the entire sheet to this wall. And then from the back side, I used a utility knife to score along that edge, and then went back in with a drywall blade and just sawed along that line. Here's me falling because I was on an unstable stool instead of the ladder that was 4 feet away from me. I can't get over that scream in the end. Well, anyway, Golan brought me the ladder so I can safely finish this project without killing myself. So anyways, finished taking off this drywall piece from the backside. And here's what the archway looks like so far. I'm so excited, it looks so good! Ah! And then got distracted by Lola. And yes, we are absolutely insane. We are completely obsessed with this dog. But anyways, now I need to add drywall to this little section, and I put my square up there to see if it's actually square in that corner, and it wasn't. So I altered the drywall to make sure it fits there, and then I cut a piece to that size. And to cut drywall, use a utility knife and keep scoring in the same spot, and then you just snap it off, and then cut through the other side of the paper. Once again, did the same thing I did with the other piece. I just put it up on the wall and then I cut it from the other side. And then I actually used this scrap piece on this side. You can see that this fits perfectly. I only need to cut off a little bit. And I cut another piece that size. And I attach these both to the wall here. And most likely, if you're adding an arch to an existing doorway, yours will more likely look like this, since you probably won't have to add drywall to the whole size. So you just need 2 corner pieces to go here. So I cut the excess off from the other side once again, and now I can start putting on drywall on the archway part. So I measured the width, including the drywall on both sides, and cut out a few strips of drywall to that width with the leftover drywall I had left. And starting from the bottom, I started attaching these drywall strips. These bottom pieces are straightforward, just screw them in with drywall screws, but once you start getting to the arch is where it gets a little tricky. So where the curve started, I put a little mark with my utility blade, and with the square and the utility blade, I scored a few times on the backside of the drywall so that when I put it in place, it will bend with the arch without the front of the drywall paper breaking. So now I'm fully on the arch part. So now I'm scoring the back of the drywall every inch or two. So at this point, I got Golan to help me because it was a bit flimsy, and so he could help me hold it up while I screwed it in. So he really just bent it into place and then screwed every little section in. And here's an up close of what the drywall looks like scored. So bent it into place, cut it to length, and then screwed it in with drywall screws once again. So now done with drywall, and now I can move on to adding joint compound to all of the joints. So I used this mold-resistant fiberglass mesh because I had it, and used it on every single joint except the archway. You don't do the corner archway because you use this beam instead. Actually, normally you use something like this with slots in it so it can curve with the curve of the archway, but my Home Depot was out of them, and I wasn't willing to wait till they were back in stock, so I got this paper corner beam instead, and I just cut it every inch so I could bend it into place. I first went in with this hot mud, aka setting type drywall mud, which means it has chemicals added to it that makes it harden faster than normal all-purpose drywall mud does, and it also sets up harder than all-purpose mud. And this one has the number 20, which means it dries in 20 minutes. Some take longer, some are shorter, but I chose this one. So I made it in small batches, and I used this hot mud for the first coat because you're supposed to use hot mud for fiber mesh because hot mud has less shrinkage when it dries, so it doesn't suck the tape into the crack of the joint as it dries. And because hot mud is good for big gaps, I used this mud for all of the fiberglass mesh and for all of the big gaps that I had in the drywall. And I applied it with this 6-inch joint knife. And then I let it dry for around 2 hours, I think, just to be safe. Then I used this lightweight all-purpose joint compound after that. And I chose lightweight joint compound because from my research, it is easier to work with as a beginner because it's easier to sand out imperfections after it dries. With joint compound, you do one thin layer and then you let it dry 24 hours and you come back and do another layer and then repeat that again. So went over all my screw holes and all of my joints and scraped it down flat using the 6-inch joint knife once again. And for where the corner beads go, I put a good thick layer, and then I grabbed the corner bead and I really pushed it into that mud that I just applied, and then scraped away all the excess, and then I added more joint compound on top of that to really set it in place. Here's a more up close shot of me filling this corner with all-purpose compound, and then pushing the corner bead into place and scraping it down, and then adding more mud on top of it. So I let that dry 24 hours and then came back the next day to do another layer. Went over all my joints again with a 6-inch knife again and doing a thin layer once again. I'm not going to go into too much detail on how to do this because this is my first time doing it, so I'm definitely not an expert. Plus, there's hundreds of videos out there that will explain it a lot better than I will. But what I will say is that the main goal is just to get the wall as flat as possible. And for me, that took 4 coats total, 1 coat of hot mud, and 3 coats of all-purpose joint compound. Normally, it only takes 2 layers, but I'm a perfectionist. I'm actually even still thinking about adding another layer. I didn't record the 4th coat because it's me doing the same thing once again. The only thing different was I switched to this thicker 10-inch knife because of the wider width. It will allow you to spread the joint compound perfectly straight along a longer distance. So I let that dry and then I lightly sanded down the whole thing. And I actually forgot to mention, I actually sanded lightly between each coat of compound. So now we're done adding this archway to this doorway, and you can follow up with however you want to finish your wall. I'm going to do mine later since we're renovating the entire house. So that's how I built this archway. Golden and I are obsessed with it. It will definitely help create the vibe of the house. For right now, I'm just leaving it exposed, obviously, because I'm going to do Venetian plaster in the entire house later on. Might make that its own whole video. Yeah, I don't want to just Venetian plaster just this wall and then I'll have to do the rest of the house later, and also it might get damaged. So just leaving it like this for now, and I'll show you later what it looks like completely done. And follow us to see how we renovate this entire house. We are turning this entire house into a beautiful Airbnb, renovating everything. So I have tons of projects and things to show you, so I'm super excited. You can see we're building our kitchen right now. Can't wait to have a kitchen. But yeah, thank you for watching. Comment down below if you have any questions, comments, concerns. But thank you for watching, and I guess I'll see you next time.